Hello everyone, welcome to the new video. For those who are interested in the manhwa recaps, please subscribe because new videos come out almost every day. Enjoy watching. The story begins on the streets where the fair takes place, and our main 14-year-old boy named Pival is happy with what he managed to collect. Now that he has everything he needs, he has to find a place to spend the night. Pival is an orphan who wanders aimlessly around the earth. On the way from the fair, he stumbles upon a mysterious man. Pival feels fear, because he feels that this is a dangerous person. His intuition turned out to be correct. As Pival wakes up in the dark, there is not a single ray of light here. He tries to move, but quickly realizes that he cannot do it. He can't muster the strength to stand up. He starts shedding tears trying to figure out how he ended up in such a situation. All he can remember is his recent encounter with that mysterious man. He remembers how this man said that he looks like a useful person. Pival guesses that he must have something to do with why he was here. He doesn't recall having any enemies. Therefore, Pival comes to the conclusion that this person must have some kind of goal. The singer does not know exactly how much time has passed, so he tries to check his memory. Despite the fact that he was an orphan, he can remember his age, his name, and exactly both of his parents. At this moment he has been in the dark for so long that he does not even know if he has woken up and starts crying. He is scared and lonely, and he does not know how for a long time he will have to suffer. Because he has not even eaten anything, and he begins to believe that he will die either from hunger or insanity. He wonders if it was not part of this man's plans that he should die of hunger. Pival starts crying again because it seems to him that he has done nothing wrong to deserve this torture. But suddenly he has a strange feeling in his hand, and he can't believe it. He finally began to move a little, and it also became easier for him to breathe. And bodily sensations returned to him. He feels the smell of moist air and cold earth, which leads him to think that he is underground, and the sound of water is heard in the distance. Pival is trying to gather strength to move his body, so that he can drink some water. He will be out of paralysis. And he begins to crawl to the water that he hears. Pival knows that he needs to fight to survive. He finds inner strength for himself and continues to crawl. Pival finally got to the stone wall from where he heard water pouring. Out of the wall, a small trickle of water flows out, and Pival greedily gnaws everything he can. However, he still sees poorly in the dark, and accidentally cut his finger on one of the stones. Feeling empty, he falls to the ground, and loses consciousness. Lying on the ground, he wakes up. Felt someone's presence. But what he felt was his own hallucination. His creation asks him why he is fighting so hard for survival. It asks, "What's so great about your life that you fight so hard? Just give up." Says his hallucination, "If you give up you will find peace." It makes him wonder if he will really be calmer if he just lets it all go. But he does not think so. He will survive. His consciousness tries to tell him that he is just resisting his strength, but find out that he will not be calm if he dies like this. He wants to take revenge on the one who did this to him. He decides to fight to stay alive, and it will all be worth it once he gets his revenge. His conscience is asked if he is sure he wants revenge, and Puree shouts yes. His conscience succeeded in this, so Pival just needed a little push so that he would not give up. Pival decided to fight to stay alive, stays on his feet, and approaches the wall again. He feels the moss on the wall, and tries to eat it. Moss tastes terrible, but it doesn't make him sick, so he goes back a few seconds. The Pival is ready to do everything possible to survive. He needs to constantly remind himself of this so that he does not give up. And now that he has the strength to stand up, he tries to walk around the room. According to his measurements, the room in which he is located is approximately 9 square meters. Walking around the room, he hears, as the iron doors open, he tries to call for help, but he sees someone's shadow leaving him food. The smell of food reaches him, and although he can't see it, he smells fish, pork, and tea leaves. Pival has received several variants of leftovers, and guesses that more than one person is involved in this case. There must be 5 or more people trapped with him in the trap for some specific purpose. Pival just can't understand why this happened. But
He can't hold back anymore and eats his plate of food. He would prefer to eat leftovers and not the moss that he had before. And now that he has eaten, he needs to come up with some kind of action plan. And now 4 months have passed and he has spent this time to increase their strength. They supply him with food once a day and never utters a word. And he has yet to see at least some glimpse of a possible escape. He thought he would go crazy in a situation like this. But his eyes will already begin to get used to the darkness. Now he can see a fragment of the space surrounding him. But sometimes he regrets that he can see in the dark because he finds that he does not live there alone. The ox notices something out of the corner of his eye and assumes that it is just another insect. But he did not suspect that in fact it was a snake. The snake clings to the ox's hand and begins to hiss. The snake looks up at the ox and bites into his hand. Peeval screams in pain when the poison is embedded in his flesh. His whole body begins to burn as if it is on fire. The pain was unbearable, but all he can do is lie down and suffer. Peeval brings food and he hopes that the food will restore his health a little. He refuses to let himself die no matter what. Time passes and he comes face to face with the snake again. Peeval feels how his body is changing during the detoxification process. One radiation that he noticed was his eyesight. Now he can see things in front of him more clearly. The ox stretches out his hand to the hissing snake. Since it is believed that the snake bite may have made him stronger. He has already heard about similar stories before. The ox hopes that he can become resistant to snake venom and potentially get a weapon. So he lets the snake bite him. And once again it seems to him that his body is on fire. But he notices that the pain is not as severe as the first time. They stare intently into the snake's eyes. Since her eyes have degenerated from darkness. Although she has bright eyes, she is exclusively a hunter, which uses its stealth to extinguish its prey and sometimes even use sound to disable it. Although snakes get a bad reputation, but they are not greedy. After they finish their meal, they do not make mistakes and do not drive away the prey by intimidating it. The snake slips away, leaving behind a hair with a new attribute. Suddenly the earth begins to tremble. And the waves cannot believe what is happening. The door opened. The ox rushes to the door and sees several more rooms further down the corridor. He looks into one of the rooms and smells strongly the smell of rotting flesh. Peeval analyzes the body and concludes that this person is about his age. He also wonders if the same can be said about other rooms. Peeval goes down the corridor and finds himself again face to face with the door, and he manages to open the doors. And on the other side of this door, he sees an alienated boy and a girl. Without saying a word, he just walks past them and searches additional rooms. He sees even more corpses, and in the end, the girl asks who is the ox. She asks him where he came from because in the dark, she can't see who the ox is. Peeval introduced himself and said that he was trapped in the neighboring sector. The ox asks what their names are and she says that her name is Evol and the boy is Chongwu. He doesn't need to know anymore and he demands that they follow him. He says that there are probably many more places like this. And after a few meters he stops at another door. They decide to follow him. And on the other side of this door is another group of people. They are all shocked to see each other, but the ox notices that in this sector, there were fewer people who died of hunger. People in this sector chose to commit suicide instead. He also noted that there are more bags of food here than where he was. Peeval tries to understand why they had to distinguish between sectors. And Evol attracts the attention of the ox and says that this group got trapped at about the same time as them. They keep walking and get to another underground room with a door. When they open the door and they are blinded by a bright light, they think that they have got out into the street, but then they realize that they are blinded by the light of the torch. But once their eyes get used to the darkness, they can't believe what they're seeing. It looks like an underground village. They approach the buildings and sees that there is no one inside. Peeval comes to the conclusion that this must have been done in a hurry because the structure is very strong. While Peeval is trying to figure out what is this village for, one of the girls from the new group is calling him. Her name is Lemon. She says that from now on she will be under his care. Lemon comes closer to the wave and asks if he always had such eyes. But there are no mirrors in this village, so Peeval does not quite understand what she is talking about. She tells him that his pupils are red and he thinks it must be the result of a snake bite. Lemon wants to know what he's thinking about but doesn't want to share any information. This does not prevent her from continuing the conversation, and she tells the ox that he is different from the others. Evol interrupts them and asks what they are doing here. Lemon says they're just talking and Evol says the others have decided to form a group. Evol asks if the ox is going to join them. But the ox is not sure yet that it will unite with anyone. But Ox says that right now is just not the right time for him. She has no other choice but to agree with the decision of Peeval. Me from the other side really wants to join the group. But Peeval knows that they have been isolated for too long and they cannot have the right cognitive thinking in any way. Peeval steps aside and decides to just watch what is happening from afar. Watching what is happening from afar, the ox notices that several groups have already formed. Here is the group in which Evol and Youngwoo are leading. The next group that leads is Kan and Lem. And the group in which the leaders are Am and Lejuna. As well as the group in which the leader is Goyen-san. And also a lone wolf child who does not belong to any group. Other groups are already talking and they are wary of the ox. They believe that he could kill everyone else in his sector and that is why he does not want to join any group. However, he absolutely does not want to pay attention to these guys and he approaches one of the walls. He thinks that this underground layer could not have been built so long ago. Given the amount of moss on these walls, and it could only be the hands of a very rich person. Suddenly a hole starts to open in the ceiling. And everyone looks up. From the ceiling a basket descends. The basket reaches the ground and it's full of food. And a few more people try to burrow right into the basket. But Evol stops all of him. Evol says they should try to distribute the food evenly. And before anyone says another word, Peeval says that he needs his share too. Peeval reaches for his share. But Juno stops him. Juno says that no one has the right to take food from the basket without his permission. But this idiot does not even suspect that he has just made a big mistake. The ox pulls his hand back and presses his fingers into his eyes. Everyone is in shock. When Peeval throws June to the ground, Peeval tells Juna to tell him something again. But all Juna can do is scream in pain. Peeval tells him to repeat and digs his fingers even deeper. If before the others were not afraid of the ox, now they are definitely afraid of him. Evol politely asks the ox to let him go and the ox refuses. But Evol promises that no one will touch his portion of food. The ox gets up and stares down at Gino from above. The ox grabs his portion of food and time goes by, and the ox is still watching what is happening from afar. During the meal, he feels that right now they are being checked and will be checked until then. Until the kidnapper's goals are achieved. Evol approaches the ox and asks how he is doing. He knows that he has no friends here, but he tells him that he has been watching them. He knows how important Evol is to the rest. She eats the least, despite the fact that she has got the most food for her group. And she stands out the most among all the other leaders. Evol asks the ox if he still sleeps alone in his dark room. The ox still sleeps alone because he is trying to breed a greater tolerance for this poison. Snake bites no longer cause him pain. And while he is talking, the ceiling opens and they will eat again. But when the basket falls, they are all confused. Because they were sent only a small portion of food. Evol can't believe it, but this is exactly what the ox has been waiting for so long. So it begins, he thinks to himself.